Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
8:37 on WMAL. Neiman Wilson with you. Pleased to have Rodney Blevins on the line, Vice President of Distribution Operations for Dominion Virginia Power. Mr. Blevins, good morning. Thanks for coming on the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, first of all, does everybody have their power back on from the derecho the other day? If that
Yes.
you serve, okay, they're all back on.
Yes. No, everybody's back on. That's right.
All right. So, looking back on it, is upper management at Dominion Virginia Power happy with the way the company responded to the outages?
You know, that's a great question. We're satisfied that we executed our storm plan very well. But, you know, good enough never is.
Right.
So we're already in the process of looking about what we can do better in the next event.
And what are those things?
Yeah, well, there are a number of things, but we'll go through a critique where we'll do an internal critique. We'll talk to jurisdictional emergency managers. We'll talk to our mutual aid partners. We'll talk to other utilities, frankly. But just to give you one example, for instance, the way we do callbacks to confirm that customers' lights are back on or check to see if they're out, it didn't work for us very well in this storm. And if you listen to the script, for instance, it doesn't say your lights are back on, but that's what customers heard, and we need to look at that and make some improvements to it and find a better way to assess whether or not the restoration we've done in the area actually restored customers.
There's been a lot of talk about smart meters, not necessarily with the Dominion Virginia, but with other local utilities. If you had a smart meter, would you know instantly if the power was back on?
Well, you know, we're actually piloting that technology right now. We have about 100,000 of them in service. There's a lot of talk about what smart meters can do, but that's absolutely, in my job, one of the primary things that I wanted to be able to do is tell me if a customer's lights are out. Absolutely.
And did the 100,000 that you have, were they affected by the outages?
Yes, so we'll have a really good data set to be able to assess whether or not we learned anything from that.
Okay.
All right, so a lot of talk after this storm. What we need to do is go out and bury more power cables. Is this a problem that could be solved, the outages that we experience every time there seems to be a major storm in this region? Is this a problem that could be solved by burying more cables?
Well, you know, there's a lot of conversation right now about cost, right? You're hearing, the State Corporation Commission study in Virginia said $83 billion would cost the average customer $3,000 a year in rates, and obviously cost prohibitive. But there are a couple things, there are a couple other factors that are worth thinking about when you're thinking about underground. For instance, much of our system in Northern Virginia is already underground. In fact, 60% of our primary lines are underground. 75% of customers in Northern Virginia have service to their home underground, but, and here's the big thing, 100% of the customers are exposed to overhead facilities at some point, frankly because the power lines don't leave the power station underground.
Right.
So you've got to track it all the way back. The other thing that's not there's not a lot of talk about, but for instance, I don't have the right-of-way. I don't have the right to put the facilities underground where I have overhead facilities. The right-of-way agreements that were executed way back when the facilities were put in were executed for us to install overhead facilities. Mm. And in times where we've gone in and tried to put facilities underground, there's sometimes one person in the subdivision refuses to sign a right-of-way agreement. It becomes a problem with being able to do it. So
would you need help from the government in order to give you the authority to do that, or would you even think that the government would give you the authority to do that? Well, there may be a solution there. I don't know, but the purpose of bringing it up here is just to highlight the fact that it's more than just about cost. Yeah, if it was an easy solution, we'd have done it.
Yeah, if it's not only about cost, there are also some regulatory hurdles you would have to overcome, so you need some help from the government in order to make that possible. In the grand scheme of things, your competitor, I guess they're not a competitor, but your fellow electric company, Pepco, seem to be coming under a tremendous amount of criticism. And I don't want you to be in the position of having to criticize another utility company, but are there big differences between the way you operate and the way Pepco operates? Are they virtually the same kind of utility company?
Well, to be clear, we do compete in terms of the fact that we, on our processes, we measure ourselves against our processes and try to get better every time, and we are watching what others are doing. we do. We are learning from each other. Frankly, there's nothing that we're doing that we wouldn't share with Pepco, and we do with other utilities. Much of what we've learned from other utilities through the years. What we don't do, though, is we don't compete in a situation where we try to put each other in a negative environment. So it's of no interest to Dominion Virginia Power, to see anybody in the industry fail. So we're trying to, as an industry, to restore service to all Americans, and we work together from mutual aid through sharing best practices to try to make sure that comes true.
That's a nice diplomatic answer. I appreciate where you're coming from on that. But were there special challenges with this storm that all of the utilities in the region faced that would not be common in perhaps other storms?
I would say two. One of them unannounced and unexpected. And the second one was this was not just a D.C. area event. We had 450,000 customers affected in Northern Virginia, but Dominion had 1 million, and it stretched all the way back to Indiana. So many utilities were impacted and had extensive damage that created a lot of stress on the entire industry to be able to resource that.
All right, I do want to ask you this question because we're learning this morning that Pepco and BGE can charge customers even though the power went out. It's called the storm adjustment, which kicks in automatically, and they can basically charge customers even though there were outages to make up for lost revenue. Does Dominion Virginia Power have that ability to do that, and would you do it?
We have a different regulatory structure in Virginia, and we don't have that.
Okay. Rodney Blevins, thanks for coming on. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
He's the Vice President of Distribution Operations for Dominion Virginia Power. The other thing is that because it hit from all the way to Indiana, usually when storms hit, you ask for backup. People come in from out of town to help you out, and they were just as busy, and they were calling for backup as well. So it became a huge problem with who could call in the backup the fastest.